meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. The lesson for this morning is going to be one word. And that word is therefore. Therefore. Grammarians tell us that therefore is what they call a conjunctive adverb. And simply what that means is that wherever you see the word therefore, it connects two sentences or two ideas together. That's why they are called conjunctives. Typically, when we use the therefore in any sentence, we are indicating a result. We're saying that there is a consequence, or that there is a conclusion that is being made. Therefore is an adverb of conclusion. It's interesting when you look at the book of Romans that Paul uses the expression therefore in the book of Romans some 25 times. You'll find that word therefore in the book of Romans. And when we look at the different contexts in which he uses the word therefore, we're going to come out with a fascinating journey. He's going to take us along a fascinating journey of the Christian life. By the word therefore, Paul is going to plot the Christian life before it begins right up to its present situation or experience. In the book of Romans, there is the therefore of giving over. And that is found in Romans chapter 1 and verse 24. There is the therefore of condemnation in chapter 3 and verse 20. There is the therefore of justification in chapter 5 and verse 1. There is the therefore of no condemnation in Romans chapter 8 and verse 1. And there is the therefore of dedication in chapter 12 and verse 1. And there are others, but we will look at these this morning. Therefore, turn with me to Romans chapter 1. And we want to look at verse number 24, where Paul begins his first use of the word therefore. Romans chapter 1 and verse 24.
Wherefore, God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lusts of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves.
This is the first time that we're going to see the word therefore in the book of Romans. And Paul in this verse, therefore God gave them up over to their own hearts and their own impurities. In this verse, Paul tells us that because of the moral degradation of man, because of the fact that man did not want to retain God in their knowledge, because man insisted on his own way and on his own terms, we're told, therefore, God gave them over. And in Romans chapter 1, we are told that God gave them up and God gave them over. The phrase in Romans chapter 1 and verse 24 that God gave them over has the idea that something has been given to you to keep. The idea is that something has been given to you to fit into the context of Romans chapter 1. God is saying to man, because you do not like to retain me in your knowledge, because you are bent on your own way and you are going to do your own thing, I am going to put that lifestyle, I am going to put that attitude, I'm going to give it to you to manage for yourself. I'm not going to take that on for you. You would have to take responsibility for that. You would have to manage that attitude on your own because you and I can't walk together if you do not want to retain me in your knowledge. You and I are not going to fellowship together if you are not prepared to accept my sovereignty and my rule and my standards. You will have to take that on to yourself. But embedded in this idea of giving something into your custody, giving something over to you, in delivering of something to somebody, God is suggesting that when you do that, there is a consequence. And in this case, God is saying there's a consequence that's going to come to you, and that consequence is going to be eternal death. So the concept here is that the Gentile world had failed to accept the God of revelation. God has said to the Gentiles in this chapter that you have no excuse. You know why? Because the invisible things of this world are clear to see. I have shown to you who I am. You know that I exist. You should have knowledge of me. But because you did not like to retain me in your knowledge, because you were bent on going your own way, because you did not like the standard that I set for you, then I am going to give you over. I'm going to put you in charge of that very existence, but you must recognize, you must know that at the end of it, you are going to face eternal damnation. So he says in this passage that because they failed to accept God, because they did not want to recognize God for who he was and who he is, they have gone astray. They have left their moral compass and have decided to live their own way. And what the passage is teaching us here is that there is, when we leave God out of our lives, when we leave God out of our mindset, that there is going to be a moral decline in our life. There is going to be a moral devaluation of our lives. And if you're here this morning and you're not a Christian, I want to tell you that you need God in your life. Amen. It doesn't matter how successful you are. It doesn't matter how you know God to put God in your memory. But you need God in your life because the further you stay away from God, the more degenerate you're going to become. In the passage, man needs a moral compass to guide his life. Man needs a guidepost. Man needs a focus, and that focus is God. And without that focus, without that mindset, he's lost. I want you to look in Romans chapter 1 again for me, from verses 21 to 24. And I want you to see in these verses the fact that the failure of man is going to come as a result of his failure to acknowledge God. But I also want you to notice that God is going to act. Notice Romans chapter 1, verse 21 to 24.
Because
that
when they knew God,
one, they knew God.
they glorified him not as God,
They did not glorify him as God.
neither were thankful,
They were not thankful.
but became vain in their imagination,
They became vain in their imagination.
and their foolish heart was darkened.
They thought that they were wise.